Virginia's Colonial Parkway is supposed to be scenic, peaceful, and historic, but starting in 1986, it became a killing ground. Young couples were found murdered or disappeared without a trace. Cars were staged, scenes were manipulated, lives stolen, and for decades, nobody had any answers. Until now. DNA has finally revealed a name. But will justice ever come, or is it already too late? Today, we're digging into one of the most haunting unsolved case clusters in America. This is Virginia's Colonial Parkway Murders. Stay with us. This one is a wild ride. All right, if you are watching on YouTube, be sure to hit the like button, share this episode if it is something you think somebody else needs to hear. And I do want to give a couple thank yous before we get started. Thanks to Chris Carter, Emily Bridges, and Rachel Nicole Schwartz for requesting the case. And thanks to Mark for writing it up, as always. All right, and you guys know, if you've been here a little while, Mark is going to give us the background of the Colonial Parkway, or this area, at least. So it's always so interesting to learn about this stuff. So here we go. The Colonial Parkway is a scenic 23-mile stretch of road that winds through some of Virginia's most historically rich landscapes. Nestled between the James and York rivers, it connects three pivotal sites of early American history. That's Jamestown, Williamsburg, and Yorktown, collectively known as Virginia's Historic Triangle. Constructed by the National Park Service starting in the 1930s, the parkway has it didn't design anything. The parkway was designed to blend seamlessly with its surroundings, and unlike typical highways, it was built without commercial... Double darn. It's like 5 minutes after lunch. I just ate. Okay. Unlike typical highways, it was built without commercial signage, traffic lights, or even painted lane dividers. That's pretty crazy. Instead, it features gentle curves, low stone bridges, and a tree-lined path that encourages leisurely travel to, enjoy your surroundings. Take your time. Do a stroll, a Sunday stroll, right? The speed limit is kept low, around 45 miles per hour, to preserve its tranquil character and ensure visitors can take in the natural and historical beauty. The roadway itself is unique in design. It's often paved with riverstone aggregate to give it a rustic colonial-era feel. It's pretty cool. It winds through forest, wetlands, and alongside the York and James rivers, offering occasional pull-offs where drivers can stop to admire the views or visit historical markers. Day by day, the parkway is peaceful, frequented by tourists, bicyclists, and locals enjoying a scenic drive or a picnic. But by night, its secluded nature, lack of street lighting, and minimal patrol presence create an entirely different atmosphere. The thick woods and quiet turnouts, so inviting by daylight, become isolated and can be kind of eerie after dark. That would scare the crap out of me, I can tell you that right now. It's this very sense of seclusion that would make the parkway the setting for some of the most unimaginable crimes in Virginia's history. And for today's episode, we are going to jump in with the known and suspected victims before we go into different theories and suspects. As with many of these cases, we have more information about some victims than others. This is a case where there are several victims, unfortunately. So that is the way that things go. Some families publicize more than others, or there are just things that are known more than others sometimes. Kathy Thomas was a determined, intelligent, and trailblazing young woman whose life was cut tragically short. At just 27 years old, Kathy had already accomplished what many just dream of. Kathy grew up in Virginia, the youngest in a close-knit family, and from an early age, she stood out for her drive and her tenacity. She didn't just follow the path laid out for her, she forged her own, even when it meant going against the grain. We love to hear it, Kathy. In the early 80s, she graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, becoming one of the first few classes to include women. Did you hear that? That's the 80s, before we started including women, but okay. At a time when women were still fighting for equal footing in the military, Kathy stood tall. She was widely respected for her intelligence, her leadership, and her refusal to be intimidated in a male-dominated environment. Do you just ever wonder, like, why? Why? It's just so sad that there are so many people that we cover who are victims of these crimes that are doing amazing things, doing great things, paving the way for others, inspiring other people. And it's like, why you gotta do mean stuff to them? Like, come on. Friends and fellow cadets described her as tough, determined, and incredibly capable. After her time in the Navy, Kathy transitioned into civilian life, eventually building a career as a stockbroker. She moved to the Williamsburg, Virginia area, where she continued to thrive professionally while building a life for herself rooted in quiet confidence. Her brother later described her as someone who was both fiercely independent and deeply compassionate, someone who would fix her own car, stand up for herself in a boardroom, and still make time to nurture the people that she cared about. Kathy was also a lesbian, something that she kept private, especially during her time in the Navy, obviously, when being openly gay could result in discharge or worse, cause why? By 1986, though, she was living more openly and had begun a relationship with Rebecca Dowski, a senior at the College of William and Mary. Rebecca was a vibrant, intelligent, and driven young woman with a bright future ahead of her. At the time of her death, Rebecca was just 21 years old, and as I mentioned, she was a senior at college, at the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, and she was majoring in business management, and she was known for her sharp mind, her strong work ethic, and her compassionate nature. Friends and classmates described her as warm, friendly, and full of energy, someone who balanced academic ambition with a genuinely caring heart. Rebecca also had a really worldly perspective. So she had spent a couple years living in Paris with her family during her teenage years, and she'd graduated from the American school in Paris, where she became fluent in French. The omelette du fromage, that kind of French. This international experience shaped her into someone both cultured and independent, and it gave her a deeper appreciation for people and perspectives different from her own. And despite her demanding academic schedule, Rebecca worked 2 jobs, one at a local daycare where she cared for toddlers. Prayers to you, girl. And another as a clerk in a college English department. This juggling act showed just how committed and hardworking she was, not only supporting herself, but also gaining real-world experience alongside her studies. I mean, that is a busy, busy life. Busy life. Like, both of them. I mean, these are 2 incredible, hardworking women. They are living their authentic lives at a time when that was not. It's really hard to think about how society really just made living, if you were not straight, so difficult. Why? What do you care? What do you care? I could date 10 terrible dudes in a row. I could do all manner of things with these dudes, and nobody would bat an eye. But I date a woman, and that's a problem? Like, seriously? It just boggles my mind. But anyway, it was not easy. It was not easy, and it should never have been difficult. It's, I would say, less difficult now, but not all the way. Not all the way. Won't even get into it. But they are just such productive members of society with their whole future ahead of them. Like, ugh, it's just sad. Rebecca had been dating Kathy for a few months before their murders. Their relationship was kept relatively private, partly because of the time period and sensitivity around any type of not heterosexual relationship, especially in the 80s. And Kathy's background in the Navy, right? But by all accounts, their bond was strong and they enjoyed spending quiet time together, including scenic drives along the Colonial Parkway. The two women were well matched, both bright, hardworking, and kind, and their relationship was still relatively new, but by all accounts, it was loving and it was strong. Now, on the night of October 9th, 1986, Kathy and Rebecca went out for food and they spent the evening together. They were last seen alive around Williamsburg. 3 days later, Kathy's white Honda Civic was found parked off the Colonial Parkway near one of the scenic overlooks. The car had been pushed down an embankment and partially burned. Inside, authorities discovered their bodies. They'd both been strangled and their throats deeply slashed. And it was described as brutal and felt like it was a deeply personal killing, and the scene left many investigators shaken, as they'd not seen anything like this before. Though the motive remains unclear to this day, some have speculated that Kathy and Rebecca may have been targeted because they were a same-sex couple. Others believe the murders could have been the work of a serial killer who preyed on young couples in secluded areas. Man, I go back and forth with this on this case because this is not going to be the first gay couple that is murdered in this case. And so I lean sort of toward maybe they were targeted, but then there were also some heterosexual couples murdered. So then it's like, okay, well, maybe not, but I don't know. Kathy Thomas and Rebecca Dowski were more than just victims of a brutal crime. Kathy was a pioneer and woman who lived her truth with courage, even when it meant risking everything. Rebecca's life was full of promise, kindness, and potential. She was a daughter, a student, a hard worker, and someone who had the makings of a successful and fulfilling future. Their deaths left a devastating hole in the lives of those who loved them. Their memory is preserved in the hearts of their family and friends who continue to seek justice for all the victims in the Colonial Parkway murders. David Knobling, at just 20 years old, was a young man from Hampton, Virginia, who had a reputation for being responsible, hardworking, and devoted to his family. We'll get more into that, but we'll continue. David had been working with his father in a landscaping business, and he had plans to start his own family pretty soon. He was expecting a child with his longtime girlfriend, and the anticipation of fatherhood was something he was really excited about. And again, he's only 20. He loved his black Ford Ranger pickup, which he took great pride in, and his hobbies included spending time with friends and working on his truck. David was described by those who knew him as someone who had a strong sense of responsibility and who looked out for his loved ones. Robin Edwards was only 14 years old when she was killed. She was a spirited young girl from the Hampton area. Described by her family as energetic and full of life, Robin had a tough side and she wasn't afraid to speak her mind. She had a rebellious streak like many teenagers, but her family saw significant growth in her as she matured, especially through her efforts to improve her mental health and well-being in the months before her death. She had been attending therapy, and there were signs that she was starting to turn a corner in her life. Robin's personality was multifaceted. She was a fun-loving teenager, but she also had a deep, caring nature, especially toward her family and friends. Her disappearance marked a painful point in her family's life where a promising future was tragically stolen. The events around the late night of September 19th, 1987, and the early morning of September 20th, 1987, really just leave us with more questions than answers, unfortunately. The known facts are that David had agreed to take his cousin, his brother Michael, and then their friend Robin out for some fun. Initially planning to see a movie, Dragnet, they ended up going to an arcade instead. And so when the night was kind of ending, coming to a close, David's brother and cousin sat in the bed of the truck because it had started to rain, and Robin rode up front with David so that she wouldn't get wet. And again, 80s, y'all. You could ride in the back of the truck on the freaking interstate if you wanted to. It was the 80s. We rode in the back of the truck to go fairly short distances like the dump or stuff like that. Just out and around. We were never in the back of a truck on an interstate or anything like that. But seatbelts, we don't know her. Not in the 80s and 90s. Absolutely not. After dropping everyone off, David ordered a pizza and he watched TV, but he later went back to Robin's house and he picked her up after she snuck out to meet him. No one knew that they were meeting up again after David had dropped everyone off earlier. We don't like that. Okay? We don't like that. And I've said it a million times, and I'll say it again. Even people who have been murdered, there are people who have made mistakes, made bad decisions and stuff like this. Well, no, not stuff like this. This is not a mistake or a bad decision. This is a what the fucking fuck. Okay? We don't fucking like that. So make of that what you will. The next morning, partiers spotted David's truck at the Ragged Island Wildlife Refuge, but there was no sign of David or Robin. The truck was found with one window slightly down. The keys were in the ignition and the radio was playing, but there was no trace of them. That is so creepy with the radio still going. Robin's family thought maybe she'd run away. For 2 days, the authorities searched, but it wasn't until a jogger discovered Robin's body, followed by David's, that the case took a tragic turn. They'd both been shot, David in the back and head, and then Robin in the head from behind. The investigation was mishandled from the start, so we love to hear that, with police failing to find their bodies in the immediate area. Where were we looking, guys? Where did we look? It was right there, like literally right there. The truck was left unlocked and staged as if for theft, a pattern that would later emerge in subsequent Colonial Parkway murders. Theories on the motive were numerous but inconclusive, ranging from a local drug dealer's involvement to a theory suggesting that a local man had stolen money from David's wallet before the bodies were found, but he was never actually tied to the murders. Despite numerous theories, nobody knows for sure what happened that night. And it appeared to be, what you have heard referred to as an execution-style killing, meaning they were both murdered in cold blood, and typically it's like headshots, I guess, is what people call execution style. It's suspected that David had tried to run, which is why he was shot in the back before he was shot in the head. Robin, unfortunately, had signs of sexual assault, and it was later confirmed that she had been raped, and some of the perpetrator's DNA was recovered. The way David's truck was discovered felt like it was set up to muddy the waters of the investigation as well. David never left it unlocked, but it was found unlocked. Again, radio playing, keys in the ignition, all right there, kind of begging to be stolen and taken for a joyride. Which, if you murdered two people fairly nearby the truck, not fairly, very, very nearby the truck, and you were like, this truck is going to have evidence in it, so I'm going to leave it unlocked. I'll even leave the keys in the ignition and the radio playing and like a door open or window open or whatever, so that if I'm the first nefarious person to come by and encounter these people, but the second nefarious person that comes by, maybe they will be enticed to steal the truck so that we get rid of some of the evidence. I don't know. Why do you think another nefarious person is going to come by? Like, what are the odds, though? That just was kind of interesting to me. Like, is there that many people walking around the parkway looking for cars to steal or people to rob or something? I don't know. Maybe there are. Maybe there are. That seems kind of crazy. And their deaths were not immediately connected to Kathy and Rebecca's. Brian Craig Pettinger was a heavy equipment operator and maintenance man at a local apartment complex in Hampton, Virginia. On December 4th, 1987, he was last seen at a ballroom dance studio around 11:30 p.m., where he had been training to become a ballroom dance instructor. After 2 days of no contact with any family members, he was reported missing. 2 days later, his vehicle was discovered in the parking lot of the Newmarket North Mall. 2 months later, on February 3rd, 1988, fishermen discovered Pettinger's body floating in a marshy area of the James River in Suffolk, Virginia, near the mouth of a local creek. His wrists and ankles were bound, and a rope was tied around his neck. And investigators believed that he'd been hogtied before being thrown into the river, where he ultimately drowned. That's horrific. All of it's horrific. All of it's horrific. But like, to be tied up and thrown into a river to drown is horrific. An autopsy revealed blunt force trauma to the back of his head, suggesting that he'd been struck before being thrown alive into the water, unable to swim. His murder remains unsolved, but it is believed to be linked to the Colonial Parkway murders. At the time of Robin Edwards' murder, Pettinger worked as a security guard and loss prevention officer for the same security services company as Robin's mother, Bonnie. She was a receptionist there. Another key figure in the investigation was Wayne Elliott Mack, a fellow dance instructor who later admitted to leaving the studio with Pettinger the night that he went missing. He later died by suicide a few months after this, further deepening the mystery surrounding Pettinger's tragic death, which occurred in the same time period and near the area where the colonial murders had taken place. There has been some speculation, maybe that Brian was gay, that he and Mac had left the studio together that night, not as friends, but as lovers. Brian was married. Certainly doesn't mean that he wasn't living a different lifestyle or anything like that. You'll see a lot of speculation about that. So that's another, like, is this why they would have been killed or he would have been killed and I don't know. I suppose it's possible, but I don't know that there's evidence to support that. There are lots of rumblings about it, I guess. Cassandra, Hailey, and Keith Call attended Christopher at Newport College in April of 1988 when they were reported missing. Keith had recently broken up with a girlfriend and asked Cassandra, a classmate, out on a date. And they'd planned to go see a movie, then they were going to go to a party afterwards. Keith had picked her up at her family's home in his red Toyota Celica. They were seen at the party, talking to various friends. They left sometime between 11:30 p.m. and 2:25 a.m. I'm going to need a smaller window than that. That's a big window. They're like, I don't know. They left between 11 and 3. That's a big, which one? Closer to 11, closer to 3. Closer to 11, closer to 2. Okay. Keith's car was found at the York River overlook the next day. A watch, eyeglasses, and the keys to the car were found on the dashboard. In the back seat, investigators found nearly all of Keith's clothes, including his underwear. Some of Cassandra's were found as well. They confirmed with people at the party the night before that these were the clothes that they were last seen wearing, at least at the party. Cassandra's purse and Keith's wallet were missing, though. Dogs were used to track their scent, which went past the area where Kathy's white Civic had been found. The dogs led investigators to the water. Initially, the theory was that the couple had gotten out to swim. Maybe they went skinny dipping. But many believe that wouldn't have happened because the water temperature was not ideal. And there was a steep 20-foot embankment leading to the water. Their bodies were never discovered. But during the investigation, it came to the attention of the FBI that a fisherman had approached another couple in the same area around the same time. The man was Alan Wade Wilmer, and he was placed under surveillance. He was observed cleaning and spray painting his truck, and the FBI executed a search warrant on his house. They found handcuffs and a gun, and an FBI polygraph examiner gave him a test. He passed. He was cleared. He was released. Teressa Howell was 29 in July of 1989 when she went out to a popular nightclub in Hampton, VA, the Zodiac Club. She was seen dancing and having fun. She left around 2:30 in the morning, and then nobody saw her after that. 7 hours later, a construction worker discovered her body in a nearby wooded area. 7 hours later. She had been strangled and sexually assaulted. No connection to the Colonial Parkway murders was made until later, and that was with the help of DNA. And remember, this is 1989. DNA was basically, the way we use it now was not even a twinkle in our mother's eye, okay? So pretty much all they could tell was blood type at that point, and okay, so does everybody else, basically, right? Daniel Lauer and Anna Marie Phelps were on their way to Virginia Beach when they vanished en route. Anna Maria was Daniel's brother's girlfriend at the time, and Daniel was planning on moving in with them. So his brother had recently lost his job, and they were struggling financially. So having Daniel move in was going to help with bills and all of that kind of stuff, right? On September 5th, 1989, Daniel's car, a gold Chevy Nova, was discovered abandoned along I-65 at a rest stop. It had been parked at an awkward angle, both doors unlocked, and the keys were in the ignition, but there were no signs of Daniel or Anna Maria. Police found dirt and grass stains all along the car's underside, which led them to believe it had recently been driven through like a field or wooded area. Anna Maria's purse was found inside the car, so a robbery was ruled out as a motive. But again, the car was left in an area and in a fashion that would encourage somebody to take it were they to happen upon it, right? Like, oh, this is convenient. I was actually out looking to steal a car, and this one, it wants me to steal it, you know? Like, I guess we may never know if that actually did work, you know? If second nefarious person did ever come along, because the car would be gone and I guess we wouldn't know that. But I just feel like it's a stretch. I just do. It wasn't until almost 6 weeks later that their bodies were discovered badly decomposed by that point. They were found by some hunters in a wooded area along the highway between Williamsburg and Richmond. They were discovered in an electric blanket that had been taken from the car. The level of decomposition made it impossible to determine the cause of death and if there had been any type of sexual assault. They were found off a logging road about a mile from the rest stop. On August 21st, 1984, the bodies of Margaret, 21, and Donna Lynn Hall, 18, were discovered in a wooded area near the King's Crossing apartment complex in Henrico. The couple, who had been dating for 4 years and were engaged, had planned a camping trip on August 17th and then were never seen again. 3 days later, a retired dentist found their Jeep abandoned in a depression off of a trail, with the passenger door open, keys in the ignition, and personal items inside. A red bandana was found hanging from the rearview mirror, and another was loosely tied around the clutch. A blood trail led investigators to the bodies, which were found beneath a checkered blanket about just 20 feet away. Both had been stabbed and their throats had been slit. Autopsy results indicated that they died around 2 a.m. on August 18th, just hours after last being seen. Both had Demerol in their systems, and Donna's body showed no defensive wounds, while Mike had defensive wounds and a lower dose of Demerol. And some investigators believe the couple may have been the first victims in the Colonial Parkway killer, noting the similarities in the method of the killings and the way the vehicle was left. The Demerol. Why? I don't know how easy that would have been to get in the 80s, but I assume much easier than it would be to get now. But that's pretty strong stuff. Lori Ann Powell Compton, 18, oh no. Okay, here we go. I'm going to pronounce this word wrong. I don't mean it. I mean no offense to anybody from the area. I mean no offense to anybody who already knows how to pronounce this word. I don't know the name of every town or every high school or every whatever, you know? My name is Teressa. It gets mispronounced a lot. I don't take any offense to it because you're not used to it, you know? It's a weird name. So anyway, just going to tell you that I'm going to have to say this word a couple times. And if I say it wrong once, I'm going to say it wrong every time. So some people get really upset about that. So just warning you, trigger warning, mispronunciation incoming. I'm going to say Gloucester. It's probably wrong. It looks like Gloucester. I know in the Northeast, it would be Gloucester. So that's what I'm going with. Gloucester High School graduate. So Lori Ann went missing on March 8th, 1988, after having an argument with her boyfriend, which ended with Lori getting out of his car. She was last seen by him at 11:30 p.m. walking on Route 614 towards Route 17 in the White Marsh area in Gloucester County, Virginia. On April 2nd, 1988, Lori's body was spotted floating in the James River off Craney Island. Her body was found nude with multiple stab wounds to her back. Get this, though. Lori worked for the same security company where Brian Pettinger and Robin Edwards' mother worked at the time of her murder. Powell's boyfriend, Chris Cutler, he passed away in 2016, was a suspect in the murder, but because of the workplace connection, some theorized that her death could be the work of the Colonial Parkway murderer as well. If he didn't kill her, I don't know. I guess she could have been like, I don't want to ride with you. I would rather walk. Like, that is going to be a better option for me. Maybe she felt unsafe. Maybe she was just that pissed. But like, man, to leave your girlfriend walking on the side of the road and to drive away. And then she's found murdered. You got to feel some guilt about that. Like, that's crazy. And again, that may have been, maybe he tried to get her back in the car and she said no. I don't know, but that's crazy. Law enforcement officials and investigators have uncovered several intriguing clues in the Colonial Parkway murders. In the case of Kathy Thomas, her wallet was removed from her purse, suggesting to some that she may have been taking it out to show someone. The FBI privately speculated that the perpetrator could be a member of law enforcement or another authority figure. Or maybe they were, pretending like, hey, are you supposed to be parked here? Stuff like that. Additionally, a piece of fishing line found in Kathy's hair and an attempt to set the fire to the victim's vehicle using diesel fuel pointed to the possibility of the killer being a fisherman. As it is suggested, they may have used the fuel they had on hand, and many boats run off diesel. The sharpness of the knife used also points to a fisherman, since they generally need a sharp knife to clean fish after catching them. In other cases, vehicles were found staged in very odd ways, right? Like Kathy's was left with the driver's seat adjusted for someone taller than her, indicating the killer may have driven it before he pushed it off an embankment. Similarly, David's truck was found with the doors open, keys in the ignition, the radio playing, even though he was a car enthusiast and never left his truck unlocked. Like he never would have left his vehicle that way. He was also known to always back his truck into a parking spot, and it was pulled forward. So now we're looking for a killer who doesn't drive a truck himself. And you know how I know that? Because every dude who drives a truck backs it in everywhere, especially if they're a dad. And David was on his way, so maybe he was practicing. He was doing the dad stuff. Maybe he had already started walking around being like, these lights pay for themselves. Like, somebody turn these lights off, and, we're raising a bar and close the door. You're letting all the bald air out, stuff like that. Maybe he was like practicing all his dad stuff. But what I can unequivocally, scientifically tell you is that if you drive a truck, you back in 2 parking spots. I don't know why. I didn't make it so, but it appears to be so. So David would have backed into that parking spot, but whoever parked it there pulled it through. David had also rewired the stereo in his truck directly to the battery, so the ignition didn't need to be set to accessories for it to work. But when it was found, the ignition was set like it would be in a car without the radio rewired, again suggesting that someone who didn't know about the truck had parked it. In the case of Keith Call, both families disputed that he would have intentionally parked his vehicle on the isolated parkway, as they both feared the dark, isolated area. His gold wristwatch was found on the seat, something that Keith's family said he would never leave behind. And Daniel Lauer's car was found facing the opposite direction of where he and Anna Maria were even headed. So why would they be in the different direction, right? Some investigators speculated that the murders might have been carried out by 2 offenders working together, as the level of control exerted over the victim suggested that more than one person was involved. The Liberty Security Services Company, where Bonnie Edwards, mother of Robin Edwards, worked, also drew attention. The company had connections to Brian Pettinger, a security guard and loss prevention officer who was also murdered in connection to the case, as well as Lori Ann Powell, who went missing in 1988. So where does this leave us in this case? Well, we're going to bring up a name that we mentioned earlier, and that's Alan Wade Wilmer. And just a refresher, Wilmer was the fisherman, remember, who had approached a couple around the same time and area that Cassandra and Keith had disappeared. He was placed under surveillance. Remember, he was questioned. He was given a polygraph, which he passed, and they were like, couldn't have done it. He passed a polygraph, right? And we all know that polygraphs are accurate and reliable and always right. Right? Well, Wilmer, who was also known as Pokey, died in 2017. Nobody had seen him for weeks, and his body was discovered when a delivery man noticed that the front door of his house was open with no one appearing to be around, which is very obviously strange. He went and checked and immediately called the sheriff's office. Wilmer's body had decomposed and DNA had to be taken to identify him, and his cause of death was from hardening arteries. Because Wilmer was never convicted of a felony, his DNA had never been entered into CODIS. But by this time, investigators knew that the DNA that they had from Teressa Howell's murder and from Robin Edwards shared genetic material, so it was likely committed by the same person. They legally obtained a sample of the DNA used to confirm Wilmer's body when his body was found, and it matched. Alan Wade Wilmer killed Teressa Howell, David Knobling, and Robin Edwards. And it's believed that he's responsible for the others as well, but since he's dead, obviously he's not going to be convicted of or arrested for these murders. And without a conviction or at least an arrest for a serious felony offense, his DNA cannot legally be put into his profile in CODIS for any potential matches. While CODIS is maintained at a federal level, each state mandates their own laws about whose DNA gets collected and entered. And because of the way it's written in Virginia, Wilmer's DNA cannot just be added in without a conviction. That's the case. I mean, it is always so disappointing when clearly Alan Wade Wilmer was part of the investigation. They questioned him. They found handcuffs and a gun when they executed the search warrant. A gun, lots of people have guns. And if he legally owned it, then I guess, that's really not going to give you that much. We know he was a fisherman because he had approached another couple, and that couple went to authorities. But he also had handcuffs. And now, handcuffs aren't overtly nefarious, right? And none of the victims were found with handcuffs on or anything like that. You can certainly use them for a multitude of activities. And he passed a polygraph. You've got to wonder how many people, well, both ways. You've got to wonder how many people went to jail because they failed a polygraph, even though it's not reliable or admissible in court. And then you have to wonder how many people got away because they passed a polygraph. There are people, it's like taking standardized tests. There are people who do well with it. There are people who don't. Even if you know the information, you just have such bad test anxiety that you might not get the answers right and you might not pass the test. You know what I mean? So it's just wild to me that they were just I don't know. Guess it's not him. And then a big fat what was him. And because they didn't investigate him more. And look, I'm not a police officer. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what they could and couldn't have done. It's just disappointing to know that they had him right there and then they cleared him completely. And then he went on to murder more people. But that's the case, you guys. Let me know if you've ever heard of this one. It's not necessarily a serial killer, but it's not necessarily not one. And there are probably multiple people involved. So that's another piece of it. No, we won't ever know any information from Alan Wade Wilmer, but can we not then look into his associates who would have been with him at certain times? Again, I know it was the 80s and that's tough, but if it was him committing multiple murders, did he have help? And if he had help, who was that? you know? A lot of times you always think like, well, a serial killer has to act alone, right? Because nobody in their right mind, like you could never walk up to somebody and be like, "Hey, listen, bestie, I am killing people. Okay, that's what I'm doing. It's a hobby. This is a safe space, so don't judge me. I've taken up this hobby. It's real fun for me. It is killing people. Now, here's the problem. Sometimes when I try to get more than one victim, I don't have enough hands. You know what I mean? 2 hands, 2 people. It's a lot going on. 3 people, I can't keep up with it all. So I was thinking, since we're good friends, that you might also, we share some of the same interests. So you might also want to join me in the killing. And if your friend asked you that, you'd be like, absolutely fuck no. Why would you even ask me that? And now I have to call the police on you. You know, like, what are you doing? Unfortunately, that's not the way it works. So a lot of times a serial killer will have an accomplice or just just a killer. But it will be somebody that there's usually kind of like that dominant, kind of dynamic there where like it's brothers or it's cousins or it's 2 friends. There are cases that we've covered where literally these dudes have been like, yo, I'm going to go out and hunt for some victims. We're going to rape them and then kill them. You in? And their friend is like, okay. Or it's a couple. Paul Bernardo, Carla Homolka. I'll use you as bait. You make them feel safe. Like, it's wild. You would think that there's no possible way, but, it happens more than you would think. So I think, diving into some of that history might be a good use of time. But that's what we have. All right, so if this case struck you like it struck me, please hit the like button so more people will hear these victims' names. Drop your own theories or questions in the comments. We read every single one. And if you're into deep dives like this one, please make sure to subscribe and turn on those notifications. We are here every single week unpacking the cases that matter. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and ask yourself, WWHD, what would Harriet do? If you liked this episode, be sure to like this episode and follow the show so that you never miss out on new episodes. Get in on the conversation on Facebook and Instagram. You can find us at Killer Queens Pod, or you can join our Facebook discussion group at Killer Queens Podcast, where we discuss cases covered on the show and all things 90s. If you want to submit a case to be covered on the show, visit killerqueenspodcast.com/case submission and just complete the form. And if we cover the case, we'll give you a shout out on the show. Lilas.